Welcome to the Access California Recovery Planning eLearning module. Just a brief background on Access before we jump into the material. Access California, a program of NorCal MHA, is a consumer-led stakeholder advocacy program funded by the California Mental Health Services Act and the Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission. NorCal MHA was founded in 1946 and is the oldest continuously operated consumer advocacy agency in California. NorCal MHA is a peer-run organization that specifically hires people with lived experience. So what is Access? Access stands for Advancing Client and Community Empowerment Through Sustainable Solutions. Here's a quick video that sums up what we do here at Access.
If you live in California and are familiar with public mental health services, it's important that you get to know us. We're Access California, a program of NorCal MHA. We are the statewide consumer advocacy program funded by the Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission and Prop 63, the Mental Health Services Act. Whether you're an individual who is receiving services or has received services in the past, you work for an agency providing these services, or you are a county-run behavioral health system, we are here to support you. Access California stands for Advancing Client and Community Empowerment Through Sustainable Solutions, but you can call us Access for short. Empowerment through sustainable solutions? That's a big task. It requires research, understanding the current system and challenges, including policy and legislation. Outreach, raising awareness, and getting statewide buy-in at all levels of the system, and maintaining a statewide network of advocates. Advocacy, turning that awareness into action, being proactive and practical about what can be done differently, and challenging suboptimal practices. Education, mentoring and creating leaders, sharing knowledge about recovery, peer support, the stakeholder process, and best practices across the state by providing technical assistance for counties and providers. Although a big task, NorCal MHA has been a leader in consumer advocacy in California for over 70 years. Access California is ready for the challenge. Learn more about Access California or how to get involved on our website, www.accesscalifornia.org, or call our Ombudsman and Advocacy Helpline, 707-572-HELP. That is 707-572-4357.
At Access, we value advocacy, recovery, and peer support. Now let's spend some time talking about what that means. In terms of advocacy, we are striving for meaningful stakeholder participation, active solicitation of community feedback, expanded opportunities for stakeholder involvement, and stakeholder inclusion at all levels, which includes policy development, program planning and implementation, and services delivery, oversight, and administration. With recovery, we're seeking infusion of recovery principles in all aspects of services delivery, which includes client voice and choice, individualized services, shared power and decision-making, and treatment always being voluntary. We advocate for recovery-based training and support for mental health professionals, as well as tracking, reporting, and analysis of recovery outcomes in all mental health programs. Finally, with peer support, Access advocates for fidelity to the evidence-based model, incorporation and expansion of peer support in all mental health programs, and living wages, ongoing professional development, and opportunities for advancement in peer support positions. Reflecting on those values we just discussed, the core of what Access does includes research, advocacy, education, and engagement. We also offer a stakeholder ombudsman and advocacy helpline. Stakeholders can report barriers to participation in perceived violations of the community program planning process and Access will review the complaint, conduct research, and will initiate a resolution with a local or state mental health agency in question. Additionally, callers can receive help navigating our online, local, or statewide advocacy directories and assistance advocating for mental health needs on the local grassroots level. To reach the Stakeholder Ombudsman and Advocacy Helpline, call 707 572 4357. An easy way to remember this number is 707 572 HELP, HELP. Now that you understand who we are and what we do, let's take a peek at today's recovery planning material. This e-learning will cover foundational recovery planning principles, including recovery orientation, the definition and core concepts of recovery planning, how to begin the recovery planning process with a new client, and how to help the client create a detailed personal recovery plan. Part 1. Foundational Principles. Before we can talk about recovery planning, first we have to understand, what is recovery? The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, is the agency within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that leads public health efforts to advance the behavioral health of the nation. SAMHSA's mission is to reduce the impact of substance abuse and mental illness on America's communities. Congress established SAMHSA in 1992 to make substance abuse and mental disorder information, services, and research more accessible. SAMHSA's 2012 working definition of recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Now let's break this down a bit. A process of change is about the journey, not just the destination. Improve health and wellness. Here we're talking about more than the absence of mental illness. Self-directed life. People diagnosed with mental illness are capable of taking care of themselves and taking control of their lives. Strive and reach their full potential. People with mental illness get better and move on. They aren't always sick, and they won't always experience a relapse. They don't stay fragile forever. According to SAMHSA, the 4 major dimensions that contribute to and support a life in recovery are health, not just mental health, home, purpose, and community. Because health is only 25% of the picture, SAMHSA's working definition of recovery includes psychosocial factors that contribute to personal well-being. Therefore, healthy and supportive interpersonal relationships with coworkers and the self-esteem boost that working provides have a significant role to play in a person's recovery. SAMHSA also lists 10 guiding principles of recovery. These are hope, person-driven, many pathways, holistic, peer support, relational, culture, addresses trauma, strengths and responsibility, and respect. You may have noticed peer support was in bold on that last slide. Just as peer support is a guiding principle for recovery, having a recovery orientation is a core principle for peer support. You can't successfully have one without the other. Other core principles for peer support include being person-centered, non-coercive, relationship-focused, and trauma-informed. In the following video, Dr. Mark Reagans explains recovery orientation in more detail.
What does the recovery model look like today?
The recovery model has grown a great deal over the last 2 decades. It began as an outsider movement, began with the consumer movement, and has moved on to now be very mainstream. There's a President's Commission about the recovery movement. There's a Mental Health Services Act in California here funding the recovery movement. There's a number of states doing recovery movements, SAMHSA, the VA, moving along. And at this point, although it's a very scattered around the system, it is every bit as sophisticated as a standard system of care. It includes the experiences people have in recovery. It includes the relationships between the providers and the people who are receiving care. It includes who's doing the providing of care and where they're doing it, what the system looks like and what the funding looks like, what the values behind it are like. At this point, recovery is not just a set of slogans. and values, it is now a very sophisticated program for how to help people with things. There's a number of people who say they're doing recovery. They put a sign on the wall and say, we're a recovery program now, and do the same thing. They say, that's not different. That isn't recovery. So I think you should look for three things when you're looking for, is this really recovery? Is this really different? And the three things are, one is this person-centered instead of illness-centered? Do all of the services still have to do with treating your illness, making sure you have medication, making sure you have a diagnosis, making sure you're complying with treatment? Or do the services have to do with helping you rebuild a better life? Is all of you included there? Your strengths and your weaknesses, your hopes, dreams, your goals? Is things included about where you're going to live, where you're going to work, who are going to be friends, who's going to be family, what about spirituality? Or is it all just focused on the illness? Recovery programs are not just about treating an illness, they're about helping a person rebuild their whole life. Second thing to look for that's different in these programs is recovery programs move from being professionally driven to being client driven. Standard medical care, I went to medical school for a very long time. I'm very experienced. I'll give you the benefit of my experience. I'll tell you what to do, and you follow my directions, and I'll check your compliance and see if your life gets better as a result. Recovery says none of us are obedient enough to do that for more than about 2 weeks. So if you're actually going to progress in recovery with a long-term serious mental illness that's affected your whole life, you're going to have to take a strong role in what's happening in your own recovery, your own treatment. Your goals are going to have to drive the process. We're going to have to do some shared decision making. We're going to have to do some collaboration. Sometimes I'll be following along doing things with you I don't exactly agree with, and sometimes you'll be following along with me doing things you don't exactly agree with. It's more a partnership and a collaboration, which is real different than the standard medical model. The third thing to look for in a recovery system that's different is it really strengths-based instead of deficits-based? Do you spend all your time talking about what's wrong, what kind of symptoms, what kind of barriers, what kind of things in the way, and let's fix all of your problems and get to help by fixing problems? Or do we say what's right about you? What are your strengths? Do you bring a strong self-esteem, a big work ethic, a belief in yourself, a good family, a spiritual background, some money along, a good place to live? What do you bring along? Because recovery is not cure. Almost all of these illnesses people have, they cannot be cured. The next psychosis is coming, the next manic episode, the next drug relapse, the next rape flashback. And the question isn't, can we make that never happen to you? The question is, can we make it so when it does happen, you're ready for it and it doesn't ruin your life? You stay held together, you don't end up in a hospital, you keep your job, you keep your family, you keep your kids, you keep your relationship even when those things happen. Did we build the strength in you to handle your life rather than you relied on me to fix all the wrong things with you? Those three things taken together, is it really person-centered instead of illness-centered? Is it really collaborative and client-driven instead of professional-driven? And is it really strengths-based and resiliency-driven rather than deficit-based? You should find in any true recovery program, and that's what distinguishes it from other good, compassionate medical model care.
All right.
As Dr. Reagans pointed out, there are three important qualities of recovery. Recovery orientation is person-centered, not illness-centered. It is client-driven, not professionally driven. And recovery orientation is strengths-based, not deficits-based. We'll cover this in more detail in the next few slides. Attached to this presentation, you can find handout on the differences between illness-centered and person-centered approaches, as well as examples of strengths-based languages. According to Dr. Reagans, the goal of recovery-oriented services is not to treat illnesses, but to help people with serious mental illnesses have better lives. For example, when we give someone medication, it's not to reduce voices. It's to help them get a girlfriend or to keep their job. We focus not on illness-based outcomes like symptom relief, but on quality of life outcomes like improved housing, employment, education, finances, healthcare, social life and families, while avoiding legal problems, drug abuse problems, hospitalizations, and homelessness. The goals are socially valued but individually determined based on each person's choices. Services, including but not limited to treatment and rehabilitation, are goal-driven, not symptom-driven. As you can see, being person-centered means having a broad focus that looks at all of you. It means being goal-driven, and those goals including things other than just symptom reduction. Person-centered services help a person rebuild their whole life. Before we move forward, pause for a moment to reflect on the following. What are the potential drawbacks of an illness-centered approach? Some of the things that came to your mind might have included the following. Maybe the diagnosis could be wrong. Maybe it ignores a person's quality of life and level of functioning, or it doesn't address the environmental risk factors, or it doesn't address prevention and protective factors. Maybe it fosters dependency on the system, and it could reinforce stigma. What do client-driven programs and services look like? Client-driven programs and services come from the inside out, are individualized, and rely on collaboration and partnership. This is different from clinically driven programs and services, which come from the outside in or top down, are formulaic, and tend to rely on compliance and coercion. I'd like to point out that when we say clinically driven, we're not referring to the medical model, but to programs and services that only measure clinical outcomes, such as medication compliance. When used correctly, the medical model and the recovery model work well together and complement one another. One way to facilitate the use of both the medical and recovery models simultaneously is by engaging in shared decision-making, which is defined as an approach where service providers and clients share the best available evidence when faced with the task of making treatment decisions, and where clients are supported to consider options to achieve informed preferences. In many situations, there is no single right healthcare decision because choices about treatment, medical tests, and health issues come with pros and cons. Shared decision making is especially important in these types of situations. When there is more than one reasonable option, such as screening for a treatment decision, when no one option is clear or has a clear advantage, or when the possible benefits and harms of each option could affect clients differently. You can find a shared decision-making fact sheet attached to this presentation. And if you would like more information on shared decision-making, you can view the Access California Shared Power and Collaborative Decision-Making e-learning module. Now, let's pause again and reflect. Why might client-driven services produce better outcomes than professionally driven services? Shared decision-making helps providers and clients agree on a healthcare plan. When clients participate in decision-making and understand what they need to do, they're more likely to follow through. With shared decision-making, clients are more knowledgeable and better prepared for a dialogue. It helps to prepare the client and understand what they are trying to do. And it builds a lasting and trusting relationship for both physicians and clients are very satisfied. According to Dr. Regans, it's often better for someone to experience that their decisions actually have consequences, good and bad, than to have a good decision made for them. Recovery orientation is strengths-based. Strengths aren't people's skills or talents or things we like about them. They are things they will use to overcome their illnesses. Strengths can be internal qualities like determination, hopefulness, self-awareness, self-responsibility, pride, a strong work ethic, family values, and spiritual faith. And strengths could be external resources like money, family, community, stable and safe housing, mentors, and friends. Strengths can be discovered or rediscovered or newly developed. We can use Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man to explain Dr. Reagan's models of strengths-based care. Social determinants of health are the foundation, the ground he stands on. Protective factors form the circle around him. One arm raises with progressive self-efficacy, while the other arm raises with strengths from struggles and building resilience. We'll go over each of these factors in the coming slides. We'll start with the foundation, social determinants of health, which are defined as conditions in the environments in which people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age that affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes and risks. These factors are mostly responsible for health inequities, the unfair and avoidable differences in health status seen within and between populations. Substantially different outcomes can result from the same illnesses depending on the social situation of the client. For example, someone with health insurance in a wealthy country is likely to have a much better outcome from treatment for an infection than someone from a poor country who is malnourished and has no access to antibiotics. This is also true for mental illnesses. Some differences seem obvious, and some, such as people with schizophrenia who are from third world countries, having better outcomes than those from developed countries, seem counterintuitive and should lead us to considering less obvious social factors. According to Dr. Reagans, while public mental health providers may say we're treating the sickest of the sick, far more often we're really treating the poorest of the sick, or more precisely, the people with the worst social determinants of health. How much more effective would our services be if we worked to improve the foundation people are standing on, too? Our service plans should actively reflect that reality. What if those factors or a similar list were overtly included in our initial evaluations and in people's initial goals? There are 5 key areas related to social determinants of health: economic stability, education, social and community context, neighborhood and built environment, and health care. Now let's review some examples of each. Among economic stability includes poverty, employment, food security, and housing stability. Education includes high school graduation, enrollment in higher education, language and literacy, and early child education and development. Social and community context includes social cohesion, civic participation, discrimination, and incarceration. Neighborhood and built environment includes access to healthy foods, the quality of housing, crime and violence, and environmental conditions. Finally, health and health care includes access to health care, access to primary care, and health literacy. And here we have some more examples of social determinants of health. Availability of resources to meet daily needs, such as safe housing and local food markets. Social norms and attitudes, such as discrimination, racism, and distrust of government. Exposure to crime, violence, and social disorder, such as presence of trash and lack of cooperation in a community. Socio-economic conditions, such as concentrated poverty and the stressful conditions that accompany it. Access to mass media and emerging technologies, such as cell phones, the internet, and social media. But before we move on, let's pause to reflect on the following. What are some other social determinants of health that could possibly be added to this list? Some things that might have come to mind could be poverty, diminished social network, incarceration, family, spirituality, political disenfranchisement, victimization, including abuse, trauma, and health-seeking behaviors and self-stigma. Next, we have protective factors, which are defined as conditions that buffer a person against mental health problems and are associated with positive mental health outcomes. Many potential protective factors can buffer a person against mental health problems. Current evidence indicates that these factors are associated with positive mental health outcomes. Risk factors and protective factors are correlated and cumulative. Risk factors tend to be positively correlated with one another and negatively correlated to protective factors. In other words, people with some risk factors have a greater chance of experiencing even more risk factors, and they have a less likely to have protective factors. Risk and protective factors also tend to have a cumulative effect on the development or reduced development of behavioral health issues. Young people with multiple risk factors have a greater likelihood of developing a condition that impacts their physical or mental health, while young people with multiple protective factors are at a reduced risk. These correlations underscore the importance of early intervention and interventions that target multiple, not single factors. We do know what makes people more vulnerable, and these are called risk factors. Each of these is an independent risk factor, and the more you have, the greater your risk. Family history. This refers to a biological connection that has been diagnosed with a mental illness or has experienced a mental health problem such as addiction, suicide, or suicide attempt. This could reference an individual's current or past history. Personal history. If someone has had a previous episode of mental illness, they are more at risk of having another episode than someone who has never had one. Trauma. This refers to chronic trauma, like living through a war or child abuse or domestic abuse, or it can involve being the victim of a crime or witnessing a crime. It can also refer to immediate physical trauma, like being in a car accident or having a significant illness or injury. It can refer to a critical traumatic event, such as being in a fire or in bank robbery. Environment. The psychosocial conditions in which someone lives might create a substantial risk, such as exposure to ongoing violence, neighborhood poverty, or institutional stigma and discrimination, such as racism or heterosexism. It could also include the environment in which someone was raised, such as inadequate parental involvement, supervision, or parents with substance abuse histories, lack of health care and other resources, childhood maltreatment or neglect, peer rejection, or association with delinquent peer groups, even if they no longer live in this environment. Personal stress. This involves significant financial problems, relationship problems, housing problems, problems with children or our parents or other family members. This can also include workplace stress. This involves work overload, chaotic environment, changing priorities, high demand with low control, lack of resources, lack of training to do the job well, and a very significant stressor, lack of social support at work. Social isolation. Research into social prejudice and stigma seems to be finding a link between social isolation and increased risk for developing a mental illness. Also, research into disability rates is finding a possible link between social isolation and increased risk for depression. This is seen when employees go off work for a physical issue and then develop clinical depression, which keeps them off work even after they have recovered from the physical issue. Remember that having even one of these risk factors means that you are more vulnerable. If you have even one, you may want to take a look at how you take care of your mental health in order to minimize the impact of that risk factor. Here we have a list of examples of protective factors for mental health. This list is also available as a handout attached to this presentation. Next is self-efficacy, which is defined as a belief in one's own ability to perform the activities necessary to influence important events and conditions affecting their life. Self-efficacy includes feelings of confidence, capability, competence, and capacity. A strong sense of efficacy enhances human accomplishment and personal well-being in many ways. People with high assurance in their capabilities approach difficult tasks and challenges to be mastered rather than as threats to be avoided. Such an efficacious outlook fosters intrinsic interest and deep engrossment in activities. They set themselves challenging goals and maintain a strong commitment to them. They heighten and sustain their efforts in the face of failure. They quickly recover their sense of efficacy after failures or setbacks. They attribute failure to insufficient effort or deficient knowledge and skills, which are acquirable. They approach threatening situations with assurance that they can exercise control over them. Such an efficacious outlook fosters personal accomplishments, reduces stress, and lowers vulnerability to depression. In contrast, people who doubt their capabilities shy away from difficult tasks which they view as personal threats. They have low aspirations and weak commitment to the goals they choose to pursue. When faced with difficult tasks, they dwell on their personal deficiencies, on the obstacles they will encounter, and all kinds of adverse outcomes rather than concentrate on how to perform successfully. They slacken their efforts and give up quickly in the face of difficulties. They are slow to recover their sense of efficacy following failure or setbacks. Because they view insufficient performance as a deficient aptitude, it does not require much failure for them to lose faith in their capabilities. They easily fall victim to stress and depression. So why is self-efficacy important? Every day, we see that people with the same level of knowledge and skills often get very different results. Self-efficacy is a powerful predictor of success because it makes you expect to succeed. It allows you to take risks and set challenging goals. It helps you to keep trying if at first you don't succeed, and it helps you control emotions and fears when the going gets tough. But how do we create and grow a sense of self-efficacy? Psychologist Albert Bandura explains it this way. The most effective way of creating a strong sense of efficacy is through mastery experiences. Successes build belief in one's personal efficacy. Failures undermine it, especially if failures occur before a sense of efficacy is firmly established. If people experience only easy successes, they come to expect quick results and are easily discouraged by failure. A resilient sense of efficacy requires experience in overcoming obstacles through perseverant effort. Some setbacks and difficulties serve a useful purpose in teaching that success usually requires sustained effort. After people become convinced that they have whatever it takes to succeed, they persevere in the face of adversity and quickly rebound from setbacks. By sticking it out through tough times, they emerge stronger from adversity. The second way of creating and strengthening self-belief of efficacy is through the vicarious experiences provided by social models. Seeing people similar to oneself succeed by sustained effort raises observers' beliefs that they too possess the capabilities to master comparable activities required to succeed. By the same token, observing others fail despite high effort lowers observers' judgments of their own efficacy and undermines their efforts. The impact of modeling on perceived self-efficacy is strongly influenced by perceived similarity to the models. The greater the assumed similarities, the more persuasive are the model's successes and failures. If people see the models as very different from themselves, their perceived self-efficacy is not much influenced by the model's behavior and the results produced. Modeling influences do more than provide a social standard against which to judge one's own capabilities. People seek proficient models who possess the competencies to which they aspire. Through their behavior and expressed ways of thinking, competent models transmit knowledge and teach observers effective skills and strategies for managing environmental demands. Social persuasion is a third way of strengthening people's beliefs that they have what it takes to succeed. People who are persuaded verbally that they possess the capabilities to master given activities are likely to mobilize greater effort and sustain it than if they harbor self-doubts and dwell on personal deficiencies when problems arise. To the extent that persuasive boosts in perceived self-efficacy lead people to try hard enough to succeed, they promote development of skills and a sense of personal efficacy. It's more difficult to instill high beliefs of personal efficacy by social persuasion alone than to undermine it. Unrealistic boosts in efficacy are quickly disconfirmed by disappointing results in one's efforts. But people who have been persuaded that they lack capabilities tend to avoid challenging activities that cultivate potentialities and give up quickly in the face of difficulties. By constricting activities and undermining motivation, disbelief in one's capabilities creates its own behavioral validation. Successful efficacy builders do more than convey positive appraisals. In addition to raising people's beliefs in their capabilities, they structure situations for them in ways that bring successes and avoid placing people in situations prematurely where they are likely to fail often. They measure success in terms of self-improvement rather than by triumphs over others. The fourth way of modeling self-beliefs of efficacy is to reduce people's stress reactions and alter their negative emotional proclivities and misinterpretations of their physical states. People also rely partly on their physical and emotional states in judging their capabilities. They interpret their stress reactions and tension as a sign of vulnerability to poor performance. In activities involving strength and stamina, people judge their fatigue, aches, and pains as signs of physical debility. Mood also affects people's judgments of their personal efficacy. Positive mood enhances perceived self-efficacy. Despondent mood diminishes it. It's not the sheer intensity of the emotional and physical reaction that is important, but rather how they are perceived and interpreted. People who have a high sense of efficacy are likely to view their state of effective arousal as an energizing facilitator of performance, whereas those who are beset by self doubts regard their arousal as a debilitator. Physiological indicators of efficacy play an especially influential role in health functioning and in athletic and other physical activities. Finally, we have resilience, which is defined as a process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threat, or significant sources of stress. It is the ability to bounce back from difficult experiences. According to Dr. Reagan's, when someone has enough strength to overcome the next symptom increase, drug relapse, relationship breakup, job loss, family disappointment, or even tragic loss without falling apart entirely, without becoming homeless or jailed or hospitalized, without losing everything they've worked so hard for, then they have resilience. Our goal is not to protect them from tragedies, but to help them build enough resilience to handle tragedies when they come, because they always will come. The end point of a successful recovery is I wouldn't have wished this illness on my worst enemy. The pain and suffering have been enormous, but in a strange way, it has been a blessing in disguise. I've found and developed strength I never knew I had. I've learned what's really important in life. There have been deep gifts from my deepest wounds. It's made me into the person I am today. To get to that endpoint, we must change our initial response from, you did the right thing coming to see me. I'm a good doctor. I'm going to be able to help you. To, I can already see in you the strengths you are going to use to overcome this terrible illness. The hope in recovery is that they will develop, not that we will cure them. Here we have some associated factors related to resilience: capacity to make and execute realistic plans, positive views of self, confidence in own strengths and abilities, communication and problem solving skills, and the ability to manage strong feelings and impulses. It is possible to build resilience, though maintaining hope and optimism is key. We can build resilience by accepting that change is inevitable, seeking social support and positive connections, recognizing your strengths, identifying new possibilities, reframing negative experiences as opportunities for learning and personal growth, setting meaningful, achievable goals, and making continual, incremental progress. You can find more information on building resilience by reviewing the handout 10 Ways to Build Resilience attached to this presentation. Before we move into part 2 of this module, let's pause and consider the following. How can peers help clients build resilience? Part 2. What is recovery planning? Recovery planning is defined as the development of an individualized strategy for achieving or maintaining recovery that is created, implemented, monitored, and revised by the person receiving services. It incorporates self-help and mutual aid, personal responsibility, and experiential learning. Now let's break that down a bit. Self-help and mutual aid. Any individual with a problem or illness can be a potential helper to others experiencing the same condition. This dramatically increases the helper to helpee ratio because receivers of help are also givers of help. Therefore, the entire process of giving and receiving help is democratized and shared. This is a methodology for seeing problems in a non-pathological way. Instead of viewing society as having 10 million alcoholics and needing help, we have 10 million potential help givers. Seeking help is not commodified or stigmatized. Personal responsibility. As they recover, individuals assume more and more responsibility for themselves. We'll get more into this in the next section of this training. Experiential learning. What we mean here is that ideas cannot be separate from experience. They must be connected to the learner's lives in order for true learning to occur. According to David Kolb, learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. So experiential learning involves direct encounters with the concepts being learned and opportunities for reflection on those experiences. Now let's pause and consider, what is the difference between a recovery plan and a treatment plan? Most obviously, a recovery plan utilizes the recovery model, while a treatment plan utilizes the medical model. But there are other differences as well. For example, the service provider's viewpoint in a recovery plan is, I help you fix you, while a service provider's focus in a treatment plan is, I fix you. So as you can see, a client creates their own plan based on their own goals in a recovery plan. While in a treatment plan, clinical staff create a plan based on clinical objectives. With a recovery plan, clients have a role in assessment, planning, plan execution, and the monitoring of goal progress. However, in a treatment plan, a client takes a passive role in these steps, accepting the assessment, plans, and interpretations of goal progress made by the clinical staff. SAMHSA lists 12 core competencies for peer workers in behavioral health services. These are: engages client in a collaborative and caring relationship, provides support, shares lived experience of recovery, personalizes peer support, recovery planning, links to resources, services, and supports, teaches information and skills related to health, wellness, and recovery, helps clients to manage crises, communication, collaboration and teamwork, leadership and advocacy, growth and development. Now let's focus on number 5 from that list, recovery planning. In recovery planning, peers support clients to take charge of their lives. Recovery itself often leads people to want to make changes in their lives. Therefore, recovery planning assists people in setting and accomplishing goals related to home, work, community, and health. But how do peers do it? Peers aid in recovery planning by assisting and supporting clients to set goals and to dream of future possibilities, researching opportunities, and proposing strategies to help clients accomplish their goals, supporting clients to use decision-making strategies when choosing services and supports, and helping clients to function as members of their treatment and recovery support team. Part 3, getting started. First, we must ask ourselves, what is the goal of recovery planning? The obvious answer is that we want to help clients realize a better quality of life. But what does that mean? We want clients to achieve stability and consistency, to develop skills and personal resources to manage conditions, to gain and maintain independence, and graduation and self-reliance, which refers to no longer having a need for the same level of support. Basically, we want to work ourselves out of a job. Keep in mind, recovery is a process. According to Dr. Mark Reagans, there are 4 stages of recovery, being hope, empowerment, responsibility, and meaning. Now let's go into these in a little more detail. Here's a quote from Dr. Mark Reagans on the importance of hope. In the blackest times of despair, what's needed first is hope as a light at the end of the tunnel, some idea that things can get better, that life will be more than the present destruction. Without hope, there's no real possibility of positive action. To be truly motivating, however, hope has to be more than just an ideal. It has to take form as an actual image of how things could be if they were to improve. It's not so much that people will attain precisely the vision they create, since realistically, most outcomes are products of chance and opportunity more than careful planning. But it does seem essential to have some clear image if people are to make difficult changes and take positive steps. So, hope is the belief that something better is possible and it is the catalyst of recovery process. Recovery cannot begin without hope. The key is having an actual, reasonable image of how things could be if they were to improve. Even though hope comes from within, it can be fostered by peers, families, providers, allies, and everyone in between. Let's look at what you can do to foster hope. You can collect and share inspirational stories of success and recovery, including your own. Look inward to remain passionate about the work you do. You can continue to reflect on why you chose this line of work, and you can explore recovery-based literature and research to keep concepts fresh. The second stage of recovery is empowerment, which is believing in yourself. Dr. Reagan has said, to move forward, people need to have a sense of their own capability, their own power, their own needs to be focused on things that they can do rather than new cures or fixes someone else will discover to give them. So in this way, empowerment is synonymous with self-efficacy. As we discussed earlier in the module, a true sense of empowerment requires actual experiences of success in order to build feelings of competency. What can you do to empower others? For starters, remember that recovery process is about them, not you. You can empathize client strengths and provide genuine encouragement. Clients often need for someone else to believe in them before they can strong enough to believe in themselves and to start focusing on their strengths instead of their losses. But be careful not to engage in shallow optimism or encouragement that's not based in reality. You can facilitate early successes. Like we said earlier, it often takes some actual experience of success to really believe one can be successful. Waiting until someone is ready to move on can often be stagnating and disempowering because readiness often occurs only in retrospect, after something has already been done successfully. Find opportunities for experiential learning, which will allow clients to build confidence. You can let go of desires to rescue, protect, and control. Engage in self-empathy and personal exploration in challenging situations. Readiness often comes after success. Readiness in this context means the client is motivated and excited to do something and doesn't just have some vague plan about it. And you can allow clients to make their own informed decisions. Do the math with them, not for them. In this video, Dr. Reagans explains more about assessing readiness.
How do I know when my relative is ready to venture out more?
So the readiness is a key concept in our system of care. And normally what ready means is, are you prepared and likely to succeed? Are you ready to leave the hospital, ready to get off your meds, ready to get your own place? That means, do you know how to do it and is it going to work out and nothing bad's going to happen and no risk going to happen? By that definition, nobody is ever ready to do anything the first time. So in our program, we use a different definition of readiness. Our definition is, are you motivated and excited? Do you want to do it? Is it just a vague idea in your head you're not too sure about? Well, I'm thinking of it pretty strongly, but I'm not actually planning right now. Or do you have actually plans? Or are you actually taking action? Or you took action and bumbled it along and need to retrench and try changing things to make it work again next time? Think about this in your own life for a minute, because just because someone has a mental illness, they're still a regular human being. In your own life, the first time you did anything important, were you ready by the definition of prepared and likely to succeed, or ready by motivated, excited? Think about this. First time you had sex in your life, were you prepared and likely to succeed, or motivated and excited? First time you bought a house, first time you drove a car. Car driving is a great example of this because they give you a bumbling license. They know you're not ready to drive a car the first time, so they give you a license to do things. Ask yourself, is your family member ready to bumble? not are they ready to do it risk-free all the way right. Our job isn't to prepare people all the way to be able to do things. I mean, if you had to be ready to have a kid, you would have never had this kid. I just hope you were motivated and excited. And then you bumbled and learned by having this kid. Same thing goes for your family members. It's hard and scary to let people bumble, but bumble alongside them, just like you had help bumbling when you were raising your kids, when you got your first job, when you drove a car, when you got an apartment, when you did everything important in your life. So our jobs, both as family members and professionals, is not to train people and teach them so they can go out risk-free. Our job is to motivate them excitement to start doing things that they will bumble and learn how to do while doing. And yes, that's scarier, but that's the way the rest of us all do it. That's the way they have to too.
The third stage of recovery is responsibility, or intentionally taking actions to recover. In this stage of recovery, Dr. Reagan says that at some point, most people who recover realize that no one else can do it for them, that they have to take charge of their recoveries. People can and often need to be supported in their efforts to recover, but they can't be caretaken or protected into recovery. Taking one's own risks, setting one's own goals and path, and learning one's own lessons are essential parts of recovery. The appeals of dependency and being taken care of can derail a recovery as long as being too frightened or traumatized to take risks. Taking actions to recover means developing goals and plans to accomplish them, actively working with providers and others, taking on decision-making tasks, engaging in self-care, making choices and taking risks, and accepting the consequences of choices and actions. What else can you do to help the clients you work with develop personal responsibility? You can encourage clients to make decisions for themselves. You can model effective decision-making skills by researching options, considering potential impacts, weighing pros and cons, making backup plans, anticipating challenges, and reflecting on past experiences. Along the way, as both progress and setbacks occur, review the client's goals and note what has been learned, achieved, and whether any adjustments need to be made. The final stage of recovery is meaning, which is developing an identity apart from your illness. According to Dr. Megan, ultimately, to recover, one must achieve some meaningful role apart from the destruction. After achieving increased hopefulness, inner strength, and self-responsibility, these traits are applied to meaningful roles apart from the destruction. The blackness of destruction that once seemed to swallow the person whole recedes in importance as the person's other meanings emerge. Connectedness to other people, belonging, and feeling accepted that may have for a while only been possible with others who had experienced related destructions within families or with compassionate helpers becomes possible in a variety of contexts. The isolation and aloneness the destruction imposed is increasingly broken and life is re-entered. What can you do to help clients you work with find meaningful social roles? Some examples include host entertaining or educational activities for clients within your program, accompany clients to community events and functions, explore opportunities for clients to pursue their personal and professional development goals, and help clients build or rebuild natural support networks. Since peer support is such an important aspect of recovery, let's talk a bit about welcoming new clients. This is an example of what not to do. While you're watching the video, try to note what went wrong.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I talked with you, I know, the other day, but I just wanted to touch base today, about your stuff, your situation. So I read your chart, and I know we talked last time. Are you still feeling depressed?
Yeah.
Depression's okay. Depression. And I know you're feeling depressed now, but I felt depressed before, and it will pass. Like, you'll get over it. It's not that big of a deal. And so this depression, why are you feeling depressed?
Well,
Oh, wait. Sorry, I had another note. Something else I wanted to ask you before. No, why, or is that depression what brought you in here?
Well, I OD'd earlier
OD'd.
because I was
Depressed?
really sad.
Yeah. Okay, so that overdose, we'll have to talk about. So then why are you feeling depressed?
Well, I was abused earlier. I just don't.
I mean, your life
deal
doesn't.
with-
I looked in your chart, and your life doesn't seem all that bad. So this depression, I think you can get over it. Yeah. Let me look at my notes here. I know we saw some stuff. Oh, hey. Yeah. Can I talk to you later? I'm gonna finish talking to her. Okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Let me look at my notes here. You got the abuse, the overdose. So can we talk about these thoughts? Oh, that area. Do you want to? Are you still having those thoughts?
No.
No. Okay, then great. No thoughts, because I know. I mean, if you're having them, it's kind of like. Why I don't understand why people think of like killing themselves. It's really very weak of them to do. Personally, but anywho's. Oh, hold on a second. Hello? No, I'm at work right now. Yeah, you know at Belmont. Yeah, I'm gonna talk with this patient here. Yeah, and I'll call you back. Okay. Okay. Bye. I'm sorry. Yeah. Anywho, so let me look at my notes. But so you, those thoughts we were saying, what were you saying about those? Did you have them? I forget.
Well, no.
No. Okay, that's great. I'm glad. So are you feeling better then?
I guess a little.
Yeah. So what do you think has worked in your therapy?
I like talking to the therapist.
One-on-one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, do you want me to see if your doctor's available? I can
Yeah.
totally arrange that. Okay, I'm going to go check that then right now.
Okay.
Instead of making the same mistakes we saw in the video, try using the following techniques adapted from Dr. Mark Regan's adult initial assessments. Your primary goal when meeting with a client for the first time is to establish trust. Greet the person with warmth and humility and explain to them who you are, what you do, and your role within the team. Use neutral, non-judgmental openers such as, "So how did you find us?" or "What brings you here today?" If you are comfortable, and if you feel the timing is appropriate, you might want to try to initiate self-disclosure by sharing something personal about yourself first. Your secondary goal at your first meeting is to understand their perspective. These tips are adapted from Dr. Mark Regan's adult initial assessment. You'll want to really listen and pay attention to what the person is communicating, both verbally and non-verbally. Avoid making assumptions. Don't try to problem solve. And ask person-centered goals. Your questions should be open-ended rather than close-ended. Be framed in positive language and focus on the future, not the past. As you watch this next video, try to answer the question, what is active listening?
Many of us don't listen to other people. Instead, we just think and wait for our turn to express our own opinion. Take a step back and look at your colleagues' conversations. It's likely it'll look more like two monologues where everyone tells about themselves. The cure for it is active listening. It's a very powerful skill. It brings people closer, builds trust, and helps people to open up. Here are 5 steps on how to do it. 1. Stay focused. Keep natural eye contact, don't judge, and be patient. 2. Really listen. Don't think about your similar experiences and what you should tell next. 3. Allow for periods of silence. Wait till the other person speaks again. 4. From time to time, repeat the other person's words or paraphrase it back to them. It will reassure that you really listen and encourage them to open up. 5. Understand the emotions behind the words. When you paraphrase, also try to express the other feelings back to them. Active listening is rather difficult and can be more tiring than talking itself. Be prepared for long conversations. On the other hand, you will gain trust and people will simply like to spend time with you. You will also understand them much better. At the beginning, try it with your spouse or a good friend. You'll see how great they feel after talking to you. If you want to learn more about optimal lifestyle, subscribe to our channel below.
Part 4. Creating a Recovery Plan. Remember from Samsa's working definition of recovery that 4 major dimensions contribute to and support a life in recovery. These are health, again, not just mental health, home, purpose, and community. It is important that recovery plans address each of these 4 major dimensions. Health refers to overcoming or managing one's illnesses or symptoms and making informed, healthy choices that support physical and emotional well-being. Some factors associated with health include access to health and dental care, regular checkups, managing health conditions, alcohol, drug, and tobacco use, personal hygiene and appearance, diet, adequate sleep, exercise, and relaxation and stress relief. Home refers to a safe and stable place to live. This doesn't necessarily need to be a house or an apartment in the traditional sense. It can be any place that can consistently and reliably offer a safe and stable place to live. Some factors associated with this dimension include safety, security, setting, location, and by this we mean proximity to necessary resources, adequate transportation and accessibility, privacy, comfort, light, noise, and space, and co-inhabitants. Purpose refers to meaningful daily activities and the independence, income, and resources needed to participate in society. Some factors associated with purpose include financial stability, employment, volunteering and community engagement, education and ongoing learning, leisure activities, artistic and other creative endeavors, family caretaking, and cultural activities and celebrations. Community refers to relationships and social networks that provide support, friendship, love, and hope. Some factors related to community include family, friends, significant others, mentors, peer supporters, neighborhood, school, work, church and other religious affiliations, and clubs and other organizations. Now, let's look at the essential elements involved in recovery planning. First, you'll need an evaluation of current circumstances. This should include identification of personal needs such as challenges, risk factors, and barriers to recovery, long-term goals, short-term goals, supports and resources, and objective outcomes and timeframes. Once these have been determined, the recovery plan should be reviewed regularly and adjusted as needed. We'll go over each of these elements in more detail in the coming slides, and more information can also be found in the handout attached to this presentation, titled Recovery Planning Guide. Before we can start to make a plan, we first have to establish a baseline. Evaluation helps you and your client recognize where they are starting from. You want to keep in mind that experiences of mental health and illnesses are informed by the client's subjective judgments. The peer's job is to offer support and guidance, not to diagnose or psychoanalyze. The best way to help is by asking the right questions and exploring relevant issues. Once you and your client have evaluated their current situation, you'll need to help your client to identify their immediate practical and personal needs to get and stay well. These personal needs are informed by the client's levels of satisfaction with the factors of health, home, community, and purpose. and the impact these factors are having on their life. You will help your client to narrow down the specific challenges, risk factors, or barriers leading to dissatisfaction in the specific factors the client identified. After deciding on immediate needs and short-term goals, you'll help your client identify strategic recovery-related targets or long-term goals they want to achieve. These are generally more big picture and aspirational in nature. Setting and achieving such goals are essential to building resilience, self-esteem, and personal empowerment. It is imperative that clients be allowed to set their own goals without judgment, dissuasion, or interference. Once long-term goals are established, you'll want to help your client break them down into simple, manageable actions. Assist your client in exploring how they envision accomplishing these goals. What specific activities would help them make progress towards their objectives? Make sure to include target completion dates. As you review goals, help your client identify specific people or agencies that it can assist with them with short-term steps. Supports and resources include the client's own unique strengths and assets, family, friends, mentors, and peers, and providers, programs, and complementary services. Encourage your client to explore the practicality of these resources and develop backup plans if appropriate. As already mentioned, you'll need to help your client to identify specific outcomes and reasonable deadlines in which to achieve them. Outcomes are objective conditions that, if accomplished, indicate to the client that they have completed or are making satisfactory progress towards their long-term goals. Each outcome and short-term step should have a target completion date. Throughout the recovery process, you will help your client review their goals, progress made, as well as reevaluate priorities and modify strategies as needed. Make sure to gauge enthusiasm and willingness to take action towards previously identified goals. Recognize progress, celebrate accomplishments, process any setbacks, and explore new strategies. Remember, the goal is to empower the client, not finish the plan. The client doesn't have to and probably won't complete the entire plan all at once. So let the client set the pace, staying mindful of their current limitations. And if the client seems hesitant about something, explore the reasons rather than pushing ahead just to finish the plan. You'll steer the client towards slow and steady progress, not quick fixes. It's better to start off with small successes, as early setbacks can be extremely demoralizing and could make the client feel worse. Whatever the outcome, good or bad, don't take it personally. This isn't about you. Setbacks are inevitable. If you judge your success based on what your clients do, you're likely to overstep your boundaries or quickly burn out. Instead, reflect on client setbacks as learning opportunities to guide your methods. Reflect on client successes as a signal that the process is working and that your methods are good. But don't take credit for the client's work. Let's revisit SAMHSA's 12 core competencies of peer support one last time to put what we just learned into context. These competencies are: engages clients in collaborative and caring relationships, provides support, shares lived experiences of recovery, personalizes peer support, recovery planning, links to resources, services, and supports, teaches information and skills related to health, wellness, and recovery, helps clients to manage crises, communication, collaboration and teamwork, leadership and advocacy, growth and development. That concludes our e-learning module on recovery planning. Just to review, this module covered foundational recovery planning principles, including recovery orientation, the definition and core concepts of recovery planning, how to begin the recovery planning process with a new client, and how to help a client create a detailed personal recovery plan. Thank you for attending this presentation. Please reach out to us anytime over the web, by email, phone, or social media.